Great, thanks, Neil, and good afternoon, everybody. Dane and I are pretty excited to be able to share our story, and from two perspectives. One, for me as a CEO, leading an organization that went from concept to now operational, and for Dane, somebody who was in with the founding idea and seeing that we're going to be operational and see a tremendous opportunity. And that's really part of the story that we want to tell to you today. And then, as Neil said, happy to entertain any questions you have when we get through telling our story. So a couple pieces I want to talk about. So Optimi Health, I like to describe us as a health and wellness and potentially even a pharmaceutical company. And I think you'll understand why I say that and how it fits in when we talk about the opportunity for psilocybin, but we also have functional mushroom products. We really see what we do is, and this is why I love our tagline, that we have life-changing medicine supplied by nature. And really, as you'll see through the deck, our pitch, our position is all about having natural-based products. So when we talk about our purpose and vision, and I wanted to share this up front because it's been important to help guide the decisions we've made, the priorities where we've invested our time. And then I think from an investor standpoint, help understand why are we different than the others that you see in the psychedelic category. And I think the big thing starts with a purpose, and it's the idea behind the scalable production of the natural mushroom formulations. And that's whether that is functional or psychedelics, we have the means and the facilities that we've built and have just are commissioning as we speak and are growing our first batch of psilocybin mushrooms. It's not a hope and a prayer, it's actuality. And we're doing that now. And really the last connection point is to sell. And that's something we'll talk about later on. And the other piece that's key here in our vision, it's this idea and the standard that we've set from a GMP level. And for those of you not familiar, that's basically good manufacturing principles and production. And what that speaks to, if you take any over-the-counter or prescription med, that's table stakes. The entry point is that GMP is just, it's a bit of a given because products don't get approved unless they hit that standard. That's the standard and the level that we've built the facility and we're going to be promoting and, or I should say producing our products at. And that's key because it's going to be a real differentiator in the space. And again, you'll see how that fits in. So last week, there was a meeting that Health Canada had from Controlled Substance Group, and it was really tied towards anybody that has been issued a dealer's license in psychedelics or is somewhere through the food chain touching on whether it's from a research standpoint, supply, clinics. And it was a bit of a grounding exercise for the Health Canada just to say, here's sort of the pathways to get access to psilocybin. One of the pieces that was really important that came out of that is what you see quoted here, and it's simply to say that GMP produced psilocybin is expected. And this was in answer to a question saying, well, there's nothing that really describes what quality of product needs to be there to be, whether it's a clinical trial, special access permission to be able to use a product, or an exemption through Section 56. So this was kind of Health Canada's response saying that the supply has to be GMP, and that is a globally recognized standard. And that was important because what we know of the space is that we, I'd say fairly confidently, can make the claim to say we're going to be, if not the only one, well, I was going to say one of the only, and it might actually be true to say that we are the only one who can actually, I would say, grow and produce products with psilocybin, natural psilocybin, at a GMP level. So I'm going to turn it over to Dane to talk a little bit about why we think we're a couple steps ahead of the rest of the competition in this space.
Sure. Thanks, Bill. Thanks for everyone for joining. Dane Stevens, one of the founders, and just kind of maybe taking it a step back to the, one of the reasons JJ Wilson and I started this company was because we really looked at some of the other deals that were going around a couple of years ago, and we never really truly saw business within them. And, we looked at investing in certain ones, and, at the end of the day, we felt like we could do a better job and build something that was truly unique. And I think that's kind of where things are today. We're the only large scale producer of natural psilocybin. And we believe that, any patient or anybody given the choice between synthetic and natural, that this is based on our conversations with current Section 56 holders and key stakeholders on the patient side, that they want the natural product. And so we made that call early on, and that's where we wanted to focus our efforts. And now we're at this amazing point where we've begun to commercialize our business, and by business I mean driving revenue. And I think that the market's told us that people want fundamentals. We got very fortunate with the raise at the time of the market, and now it's time for us to deliver. We've checked off everything we wanted to do on our prospectus. We've become licensed, our buildings are complete, our nutraceuticals are out the door, and now it's time for us to really bring some value to the shareholders. And I think with the team that we have, and relying a lot heavily on the expertise from the Wilson family and the Safricks, and our shared experiences of doing private businesses before, really allows us to be uniquely positioned to drive this thing forward and be one of the, in our opinion, the only producer right now. And we've searched long and hard to find great product on the natural psilocybin, and we couldn't find it. So here we are today, after IPO a year later, with all of our assets ready and our capital expenditures complete. And now it's just operational costs going forward. So, we're obviously firm believers. We're active on the deal side. We think our stock is cheap right now, and we're showing that with our own buying. So I'll kind of leave it there for Bill to kind of continue on. But we're a confident group, and we're running this like a real business. We're obviously not bankers ourselves. We come from the business side, and speaking with our shareholders over the last few months here, as the markets really sort of dipped, they believe in us to deliver, and that's what this next year is all about.
That's great. Thanks, Dane. And it's a good setup to talk about. So what is the opportunity? And there's a couple things. So one is there's a multi-billion-dollar opportunity in the nutraceutical space. And I say that functional mushrooms is a pretty hot category. It's been well understood in Asia and other parts of the world. In North America, I would say North Americans are just waking up. As Dane said, we've entered the space and see where that can go. When it comes to psilocybin, that it's uncharted territory. But there's a couple things that you're going to see in the story that we share here. One is that we know Big Pharma wants in, and having started my career 30 years ago with Procter & Gamble and spent 15 in the pharma space, I know the playbook. I know what the venture caps teams in there look for when they get in, and when the decision's made to start investing in R&D and molecular discovery. The one thing you need is raw supply. Well, we are, as best we can see, the only act in town at a scalable level that could give the amount that these pharma companies need just to do their research. On
And
top
that's
of
not
other
just, sorry,
clinical trials.
2 seconds. That's just not locally, that's globally. So I
Yeah.
think that's a key distinction to make there. Sorry, Bill, I cut you off.
No, it's a great point to add, and it's important to understand, because in a few slides when we show market opportunity, this is really where a lot of it's going to be driven from. On top of the fact that of the hundreds of sites around the world that are conducting clinical trials, the bulk of those are using psilocybin. The challenge a lot of them are running into is actually having supply. We're going to be able to supply it to everybody. So there's true uniqueness of where we see that opportunity hitting. When we describe ourselves, I would say hallway conversations, people ask, in a few words, can you describe who Optimi is? Natural is important, because all things that we're doing is based on natural-based products. This is an actual picture of one of our buildings. We have two 10,000 square foot facilities in Princeton, British Columbia, that are being commissioned as we speak. We have the ability to scale. That's something which, again, even as we look at the top players in the mushroom space, none of them do. We do. And I say accessible because we're quite open to, and as we've been getting inquiries, and we have for months, as to what's possible, can you do? I would say everything from, it's a given that what we're going to be able to do and grow for a psilocybin standpoint is going to be at a top standard to a scale no one's going to be able to touch. Even on the functional side, and we're filtering inquiries. In fact, I'm on a call this afternoon where there's a specialized mushroom, and I'll just leave the name out because otherwise it would give away the company, but they basically need 20 tons supply. There's pretty much nobody in the world that could do it. We've got the facilities, we could actually make that happen. So these are the type of inbound inquiries we're getting. And for us, it's really determining, looking at the P&L tied to it, to decide if we want to do it. It's not that we could do it. We want to make sure that we are also, we do have a lens. I mean, while we've got a passion for mushrooms, we're also a for-profit company. So obviously not lost upon us. The other piece is when I showed at the start that slide from Health Canada and talked about sort of a GMP standard, the words that weren't included in there and people were learning didn't quite understand, it's really dealing with this whole notion of safe supply. Right now in different parts of the world, if somebody's allowed to be authorized for an unapproved medication to take it, and in this case psychedelics, what's been, if you want to call it acceptable, is somebody could get into special access approval, or I would say more through a Section 56, which is an exemption that comes right from the health minister, and then kind of left on their own accord to go to, because I think the people on the call here are all lower mainline, one of the head shops and buy a bag of mushrooms, and bon chance with that. It's, you don't know what you're getting. There's no quality standard. And the piece, as I said, whether it's for that Section 56 example, but even for clinical trial, we're finding that the space needs education and knowing, make sure that the product you give your patient isn't going to make them sick. The good thing is with psychedelics is you can almost take an elephant's dose and you're not going to die. The bigger piece is, do you know where the product came from? Can you actually trace it to a batch number with a certificate of analysis? And again, this is yet another area where we know we're going to stand out. So when we talk about the cap table, I just wanted to share with you and give you a quick highlight to say it's pretty clean. We haven't gone through a horrific dilution. As Dane alluded to, when we went public a year ago, we had a very successful raise at I think a very generous valuation. I would say that we're value priced right now, trading at, in fact, we're up today at 32 cents. But the real key takeaway here is that the cap table is pretty clean. We're not really, in fact, our cash position is strong. Our burn rate, because that's a question that came up in the last walkthrough that we did, we're the biggest expenditures we've had from the 20 million that we took in were in building the state-of-the-art facilities in Princeton. Our burn rate right now is about 2 to 250 a month. So we got a long runway of cash. The good thing is with the operation, as we scale up, it's actually not that labor intensive. So different than cannabis, which is, I guess, your best kind of equivalent, where there's high power costs and quite frankly, a lot of people involved because it's a fairly high touch process. Mushrooms are pretty easy. You put them, once you get your grain spawn and then you put them into your substrate and you let them grow, you leave them alone. And it's a room that has sort of 12 hours light, 12 hours of dark. So the power consumption level is actually fairly low. So we're pretty bullish and optimistic in that regard, that we've got good runway. And when we do go and seek to get our, I'd say, our next capital intake, it will probably be to call it, Dane, what, like a short list of preferred.
Yeah. I mean, given sort of everyone is in the know, sort of, on our team, we're bullish on our own deal, and we've had that support since day one. And now that we've, completed all the milestones that we set out to do, if we do need some cash, we'll probably just go to, the Wilsons and some of the guys on our advisory team, as long as, and myself. But if there is an opportunity to go raise more and things become more favorable, we will, we'll take that route again. And I think it was obviously really, I know Research Capital's on the call, so they helped with the IPO, and the shares that are available in the market are the foreseeable shares that are going to be available for interested parties. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Dane.
Thanks.
So why are we optimistic? Why are we excited? Well, the addressable market and what you're seeing here in terms of some stats, everything from areas that there's real potential for psychedelics and psilocybin, everything from anxiety, depression, PTSD, existential dread or end-of-life fear, addictions, and other levels of substance abuse. All of these are driving, and at this point, because there's conventional therapies, and quite frankly, in some of these categories, they really don't work. I mean, even as you may or may not be aware, even in the depression anxiety space, the meds are, you're on them for a long time. You're 6 weeks before you even know if they're starting to work, and you titrate up and down. The side effect profiles are horrific, and you're kind of on them for life. And the other part that's a bit discouraging is they work in 50% of the patients and the comorbidities that they're being prescribed. So through this, there's a real scientific curiosity and hunger in the medical community on, I would say, brushing off research and actual practical use that had been done extensively and an entire generation missed when in the early 70s, the Substances Act was passed through US, and then 140 nations kind of tagged onto that and made psilocybin a controlled substance because it was being used quite routinely. The interest in clinical trials is tremendous, and that's in different parts of the world. US leading the way, but Europe's not far behind, and Canada's actually doing a fair number. And guess what? They all need product. And I think what they're discovering and where they're getting held up is they can't find it. And when we look at sort of the supply chain market, interesting fact that of the literally 1,000 facilities worldwide that actually produce meds, most of them are just waking up to the true opportunity with psychedelics. And as I said, that while the ones who are trying to get ahead are going to look to secure their supply to make sure that if they know they're going to have an entrant into the category, which could truly be worth billions of dollars to whomever the successful company is, they need raw supply. And right now we are positioned that we will be the one easily to be able to meet the needs of those pharma companies and other opportunities where others at the R&D side and are doing tabletop growing aren't going to be able to come close. The other part that's also a statement of fact is of the market or the companies that are producing psilocybin today, several tried to bet on the production of synthetic versus natural. We obviously fit into the natural. We are the only one who can truly scale. The demand is significantly higher we're seeing for natural, in part because what is coming out, it's psilocybin's important, but part of what ancient cultures have known and the scientists are waking up to is knowing that it's the alkaloids and other elements tied into a psilocybin containing mushroom that might be actually equally as important versus just the psilocybin, and call it this sort of oh, for goodness sakes, halo effect.
The entourage.
Yeah, and the entourage effect that can be delivered through taking a psilocybin containing product. So for that reason, the push to get it natural, both on the R&D side and then the products that are actually going to be used by patients, that's where we see the big demand. The other part too is that the stigma tied to psychedelics, fortunately, hasn't really carried through with psilocybin. LSD was probably the one that was called out and where you certainly saw the most dramatic media examples in the past that had attention. We don't see that for psilocybin. And in fact, the favorability index in terms of patients wanting to demand it or use it is quite high. And research that was conducted, and this is actually within the last year, definitely supports that. When we also talk about sort of what are the key pieces that are going to make us different, we're investing in the research and development side, and as much as anything, and this, by the way, is a live shot or a real shot within one of our facilities at Princeton. Our commitment is to making sure that we can get to, and this is again a similarity to cannabis, but I'd say unique. Getting to the perfect genetics is key with any botanical, and whether that's for any agronomic product, whether you're growing wheat fields, corn, cannabis, or in this case fungi and psilocybin, you need volume to be able to get to putting out great yields, because with that you take your strongest survivors, you clone from those, and then you just continue to make your crops. With our turnover cycle, basically now that we've got our first crops growing, of being able to produce crops every week with a rotation based on sort of the amount of grow rooms and space we have, we're going to get a perfect genetics in a matter of months, whereas for a lot of people it would take them years. So again, that's a pretty unique piece and where we're investing, as well as to say what are the end products that could be possible for microdose product or macrodose product. And we're doing work and investigating there. To give you a sense of the scale, so as we are basically getting our operation fully running in Princeton, we'll have the ability to produce basically 2 million grams of dried fruiting body mushroom for psilocybin mushrooms a month. That also, by the way, could be true of other strains of functional, which again, we're already getting inquiries as to interest to say, what could you grow and what could that look like? Because again, the world's waking up, or certainly North America is, to the uniqueness of not just psilocybin containing mushrooms, but functional mushrooms. And we will be in a place. So this is It's a bold goal, but I love it, and I know we're going to deliver, and that we will dominate the natural and functional mushroom and psilocybin market on the quality and scale. No one will be able to touch us. So if I'm an investor, what's that roll into? We're going to be reporting revenue. Even when we do our next one, while it would be modest from a nutraceutical launch, we're expecting to be producing revenue. Well, we are on the nutraceutical side, and myself and a small group are working at securing contracts for psilocybin. So we expect the bulk of those upfront to come from centers around the world that are conducting clinical trials needing product. The SAP, or the Special Access Program, is really sort of one of the other means right now where Health Canada will approve through a clinician that's submitting an approval to them, off-label use, or I would say a non-marketed use product, and that's where psychedelics fit in. Again, we will be supplying in that. On the retail side, obviously that speaks more to our nutraceuticals, but I would say retail, that as other jurisdictions of the world open up and have, whether it's a medicinally licensed or a recreational market for psilocybin containing products, we will be front and center ready to go. And then on the R&D side, we also know that there's a pretty keen interest in the analytics of mushrooms and its alkaloids. We have a state-of-the-art facility that we've built in Princeton, and I would say, just based on the pure volume of demand, we'll be the ones at the cutting edge of supplying and doing R&D in that space, and also being able to sell as a service our ability to do that for others. So with that, I'm going to stop talking. Dane, anything else to add, or can we open the floor up to questions?
Yeah, let's open it up. I was just going to say, we're in the situation where we thought, you know what, honestly, no one else is doing this. If we build it, they will come. And right now we built it and they're coming. So, it's a big year ahead for us, and I'll leave it there and happy to answer any questions.